doesn't matter. Right. It looks like Orman's running a little bit behind, but this one's going to be a bit different. I didn't come in with any sort of, I want to, bridge into this or work into that or anything. I think what would be most useful is just to kind of get a location for everyone, find out where everyone's at, what's live in them. And I think something amazing will come out of it. So does anyone want, what's new? What's bubbling? I can see something bubbling in you, Mike. See it in your eyes.
With me, it's more of a revisiting of things. Yeah, sort of a project I've been working on for 30 odd years, and it from time to time it stalls. Yeah, and so it's been around for 30 odd years, but it hasn't been live for 30 odd years. It's here and there, and but it's very live with me at the moment. So it's just,
can you go into more about the nature of the project?
Yeah, it's a personal development journey, based very loose, very well. It was originally based very tightly around the tarot, but the fool, the tarot and the fool, as the fool as a cosmic entity, as the void, as that kind of thing, rather than the fool as the jester. The fool as an archetype. And it's just mapping a personal journey with that. And like I say, it's something I've done for a lot of years, but up until about 3 or 4 months ago, there was a bit of a lull with it. So I've just started rebuilding it and collating and redrawing the pictures, and started to repaint the pictures and things for it. So yeah.
So whereabouts?
Live right now.
Whereabouts in creation does the signal for the fool come?
Well, it's where it came from originally. I mean, I was working with it was sort of very, very much pre-Emin days with me, and I was working with stuff like Alan Watts and Gurdjieff and stuff.
Yeah. Talking about this, right?
Then, sorry?
Talking this card?
Yeah. Well, that was the first set of cards that I was using was the Framstrong deck, as it used to be called.
Right.
So yeah, that was the first deck I was using, because originally I hadn't attributed it to the fool, to the void. It was, I was working sort of Eastern philosophies, Zen, and that kind of stuff via, as I say, again, I'd come to it through Alan Watts, through ninjutsu and stuff like that, from the martial arts side of things. But a mutual friend of
can I just jump in there, Mike, please?
Yeah.
Orman thinks he's got a corrupt link, so I've had to send him the link again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
you. He's on his way.
Yeah, mine wasn't working at first. I had to reconnect to the server. So yeah.
Right.
So as I said, a mutual friend of ours, a mutual friend of theirs and mine, sort of had been part of the Emin in his past, and he was talking about the fool, and I was talking about, he was talking about the tarot, and I wasn't remotely interested in the tarot at that point. I'm talking sort of mid-80s, wasn't remotely interested. I was interested in the philosophy of Japanese and Zen and stuff. And it was only as we sat around in the pub, the three of us, well, more than the three of us, but the three of us, and then obviously the penny suddenly dropped that what I was talking about and what he was talking about was the same thing. When he was talking about the fool and I was talking about the void, and the equal and opposite, from the Kabbalah, the An Sophor and stuff like that. And the overlaps were so tangible that we just sat down and started working on that project all those years ago. And he completed this part of his journey in November, and I think that spurred me on to think, you know what, I need to get this done and committed before I complete this part of my journey too. Yeah, yeah. His meat chariot have decided not to work anymore.
Let me yeah. You mentioned something that strikes me about what you mentioned is that you know, you were coming from one angle. You were talking about the void, but how it relates to the Fool card and how it relates to Eastern philosophy. And you know, someone else was coming from a different perspective, and you had this realization, right? That
Yeah.
at one point in time, you're both talking about the same thing. Are you familiar with I Ching? Like the
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
okay. I kind of sensed that you probably were. So for those that aren't, the I Ching is basically a series of broken and solid lines that represent the positive and negative forces, right? And then there is this aspect of something that might be a change, what they call a changing line, right? This would be the neutral thing. And the problem when someone is looking into the cosmic triangle and trying to make this connection with the I Ching is in modern Taoism. I'm not saying like the Taoism from 5,000 years ago, but in modern Taoism, they've forgotten about that third vector. They've forgotten about the neutral vector. They still call it the changing line in the I Ching. But the way that ties in, and this will suddenly become quite obvious, is if you're looking at the cosmic triangle. Better?
Nicely done, Mr. Pierce.
I've been practicing. When it comes to I Ching and cosmic triangle and Enneagram, you know, again, it's all the same thing. But I've said this before. There are 6 ways. There's only 6 ways around a triangle, and if we instead say point 1, 2, and 3 instead of positive, negative, and neutral, you'll kind of get the gist of this. You can go 1, 2, 3. So we'll say that 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, and then 2, 3, 1. And then it reverses, right? And so then you have to start going counterclockwise, because then it's 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, and 3, 2, 1. And those are the 6 ways, right, around a triangle. Is everyone following so far? Just give me a verbal yes, because I've got Sechin, but there's no visual.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Mike, going back to the idea of the I Ching is, if you take this like positive, negative, neutral, do you understand so far? Like, we'll take the first one, 1, 2, 3. And then 3 would be the changing line. This is where the neutral comes in, okay? So this yields 2 trigrams, right? This yields fire, I think this one is, right? And if it changes to its opposite, in other words, that changing line becomes its opposite, then you end up with, I think, mountain. I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've looked into it, yeah? But this is that neutral vector in here. And if you go through all the positions of the 6 ways around a triangle, you come up with everything between heaven and earth in I Ching, okay? The only things that you don't get are the full solid, right? Which would be 100% yang force, right? And the full negative in there. And now, to take it even further, this ties in. So this is an Eastern approach, right? And this works for a mind that is geared that way. Yeah. The same thing appears in the Enneagram from the standpoint of, with the inner symbol, this 1, 4. You familiar with the Enneagram? Who isn't? If you're not, I'll go into a bit of it. Just tell me. Okay, good, because I've been doing your homework. These 6 points on the Enneagram would represent the 6 trigrams, right? That we came up with that 6 ways around, everything between heaven and earth. And then when you throw in the inner triangle, this is where it gets interesting, because this shows you at this point that it's actually not a stateful diagram. In other words, it's continuously moving. It's continuously changing from one thing into the next, into the next, into the next, right? And so at all 3 points in here, you've got all the forces of positive, negative, neutral, positive, negative, neutral, positive, negative, neutral. So Mike, where does the void fit into that?
I've got my mic on. Yes. Well, the void is the bit that sits above all of that, and it covers all of it. So
Okay.
if you use the thing about the fool, it's one of the reasons why the work that we're on, and I always assumed it was, rightly or wrongly, was part of the reason why there's no fool in the Frownstrong deck. Is that, as in not used in the same way as people traditionally use the fool within a tarot deck. I know the card is there, but you don't traditionally use it the same way, because if we look at for instance, the Kabbalistic approach to it, the fool represents the equal and opposite of everything. It's all and nothing. It is the line that separates everything that is and everything there isn't, and can flip equally. It is the changing line between both reality and non-reality. It's the conduit through which a minor and a major arcana would join. It's that crossing point, and that's the zero. It's not the zero as in a Western idea of nothing. It's the Zen theory of no one thing in no one place in no one time, ergo everything. And it's to get back to, and that's the idea within the work that I've been working on, is that is the reset. That is the human potentiality. That's what we came from. That's what we should be aiming towards. So the stripping away of rather than the adding to refine, to get back to that, away from the societal constraints with the religiosity, with the geographical birth, time, place, birth. Is to get back to the core of what we are deep inside. And you do that by stripping away until what you're left with is the zero, is the fool.
Yes. This is something you're absolutely right from the standpoint of, let me think here. So I had the Enneagram put up there before, right? And another version of the Enneagram is the ray of creation. Are you who is not familiar with the ray of creation? I think that's probably easier. Just say, tell me more. Everyone familiar with it? Okay, great. It's going to be an easy group. I like to look at it from this standpoint. And Sachin, I've gone through this many times before, so you could probably give this lesson, but the do re mi, the solfeggio, right? The do re mi fa sol la si do. The original meaning of it was not the liturgical singing, right? Catholic singing. That was just how it was preserved. Actually preserved from a much more ancient time where these were initial names for things. So Re was short for Regina, in other words, ruler, and the moon was known as Regina Coleta or something like that, ruler of the heavens, right? Queen of heaven. Okay, so you've got moon. And I'm Mike, I'm coming back to this stripping away thing because it is absolutely vital, and you're absolutely right. Me is short for microcosm. In other words, the small universe or small world, right? Microcosm, and that would be Earth, our planet, I should say. Fa, short for Fatum, which is in ancient times they thought that the planets were the ruler of mankind's destiny, which in many respects they are, but fate is where the word fate comes from. So Fatum. This would be all planets in our solar system, because there's other, you got to understand, there's other rays, right? It's like a tree coming. Sol, pretty obvious because it hasn't changed at all, solar, but that's sun. La is short for lactate, which it means milk, lactate. And of course, that's referring to the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, so you have galactic. And then C, you've got sidereal, which is all stars, right? The universe, everything above that. And then you've got something up in here that is beyond that. And I think that dough up there, just like the dough down here, which would be, you know, utter annihilation. By the way, dough in this context stands for dominus, which means Lord, right? All encompassing, yeah. But that's that source in there. And then, you know, we talk about the laws, right? I mean, most of you have had the lesson of, you know, at this point in the ray of creation, there are 3 laws. At this point, there are 6 laws. At this point, there are 12 laws. And what you really end up with, and this also, by the way, ties into Kabbalah and the tree of life. And I'll show you that in a minute here. But what you also end up with is really 2 processes. She's telling me I need to zoom, but I think this is as close as it gets. But you end up with, number 1, this ray of creation, or this process of creation, where things go from more energetic to more physical. Okay, and this ties into the concept of hydrogens and whatnot, all that type of stuff. And this ray here would be one of manifestation, right? It would actually be the opposite of having a human evolutionary event, because we don't start here. This is where creation starts and comes into manifestation, right? We start down here and go this way up the bar. And so you're right, because if you think of down here, you've probably heard this, like 96 laws, and I can go over that diagram too, but I did last time, right? And you've got 48, 24 here. What you're doing in a process of evolution is you're stripping away. You're losing restrictions. And I'm making this point because I don't think this is how most people think of a personal development journey. I believe, from talking to hundreds or maybe more people, I believe most people think that a personal development journey means acquiring more knowledge, acquiring more trinkets, you know, acquiring this, acquiring that. I can do this, I can do that. That's not really how it works. It's actually losing things. And just like a you know, an artist may start with a big block of wood and begin stripping away and chiseling things out of it. That's when those things like, you know, clairvoyance, or, you know, all of these types of things that you supposedly gain along the way are actually just becoming revealed. You're not gaining them. You're just chiseling away, making less rules for yourself. So you could say this is the ray of restriction, and this is the ray of freedom, going that way. Now, there is a clue in here. If you play the piano, right, everyone can kind of picture a piano keyboard. Starting at note C, you've got the white key, black key, you know, and so on and so forth. There are 2 points in any musical octave where there is no semitone. And if you look at a piano keyboard, you're going to see this just like blank spot, right? And it just so happens between here, this is one spot of it, and between here, you can put musical notes, okay? You can go C, D, E, no E sharp, F, G, A, B, no B sharp, and then C again in there. These are points, and this is a natural thing. This is not man-made. This actually is, the musical scale is a code for the ray of creation, how things came together. Now, even more interesting, and I'm not going to do this correctly, but I'm going to give you a starter for something, Mike, because you had talked about the Kabbalah a lot, right? I think there's one more down here. One thing that you'll notice about the lines in these types of things is that there are breaks. You can go from do, re, mi, but then it can't go fa, sol, la, si. You'll understand that there's these breaks between lines, between these different points. The way that they draw the Kabbalah, or I should say the Sefer Yetzirah, right, the Tree of Life, is an illustration. The reason why there are 10 points on it is because it's an illustration of both directions of the ray of creation. 10, you go see, or actually, so it starts from the top, right? Because from creation standpoint, it's still a forward moving process. And so from God and creation standpoint, it says do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, right? And we don't see it that way. We see do up there and we have to climb back up it. But for us, the process of climbing up is also a do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si thing, you see? So dig up. If you want to understand better what I'm saying, because I cannot reproduce the drawing of the Sefer Yetzirah right now. If you trace the lines and how to get from one position to another, you'll find that those breaks happen at exactly the places you would expect. That do, re, mi can't get there, fa, sol, la, si, do, and then do, re, mi can't get there, and so on and so forth. So we've taken a bit of a trip here, right? We started off with Eastern philosophy. You talked about Gurdjieff, and I drew that into there. It's all the same thing, though. It's just a matter of once you actually understand, and really what it comes down to is understanding the laws. You could quite literally come to all of this if you understand the law of three, right? Because that is really the first triangle that appears. It goes from that nothing, that void, to 1, 2, 3, and then from there, everything else can fill out. Think of it this way. This is like the seed or the yolk inside of an egg, okay? Let's say that whatever this is, whatever that is up there, had this conception of splitting in half, okay, to be able to look at itself, right, to analyze itself, to look at it. And in so doing, it became itself and the 2 points in there. Now, this is just a simple triangle, but like I said before, there are 6 ways around a triangle. So already the observation from this standpoint is no longer a 3-fold thing, but a 6-fold thing. It already has that yolk, that seed, that inner awareness of, wow, 3 can actually become 6. Okay, and so then it creates the law of 2, right? This flip over in here. And I went through some of this last time with the positive, negative, neutral, and how we got to, 96 with 96 laws at the moon, which is all, just one huge triangle, right? But the point is that you could get to the Sefer Yetzirah of well, it's actually not Jewish in origin, it's actually Chaldean. Yeah. But you could get there, right, from just understanding this process of the law of 3. You could get to the ray of creation. You could get to the Enneagram. You could get to the law of 4. I'll show you how. Are you interested? Am I babbling? Do you want to break off into something else? Okay.
Carry on, Zach.
All right. In Western cosmology, we have the 4 elements of earth, air, water, and fire, don't we? We've all heard of those. And the 5th, the penultimate one, but we won't talk about that yet. That's how we get there from it, though. These are planetary manifestations. These are not cosmic manifestations. And what I mean by that is that when you get opposites, let's just take one opposite. You've got hot and cold coming through. Those are 2, right, apparent opposites. Something is either hot or cold. What is heat? For the scientists among us, we would define heat. We would say, oh, well, heat is when, the molecules are spread apart and they're moving really fast and expanding. And cold would be when they aren't, right? They're getting closer and closer and closer together, okay? But this opposites, like this spark of the electrical wire, they can't produce anything on their own. You can't have hot and cold coexisting, right? So what has to happen is from another octave, something else has to enter tangentially to it. Is that the right word? Tangentially? Okay, perpendicularly.
Yeah.
And here you have dry and wet. Again, you can't have dry and wet occupying the same space. But now, what you've made possible is our planetary view of things at this point, because hot and wet, they attribute to air. Wet and cold, they attribute to water. Cold and dry, earth. And hot and dry, fire. Okay, but you can't. So there's the law of four moving to the shifted axis of the result of those types of things. And then think about it from this standpoint. If you're air, what would you see as opposites? This is where apparent opposites comes into the law of two. If you were fundamentally the element air in this context, you would actually look left and you would see hot, and you would look right and you would see wet, and that would be your perception of duality, right, in this. Now, we have the same type of thing going on with us. Forget about the hot, cold, wet, dry. Solid, liquid, gas, and plasma is how science dictates these four things, but it's just words, right? From our standpoint, this is how I know. If you take a human by H here, when we look left from the event of biologically or gender speaking, I should say, we look left, we see female. We look right, we see male. But what's really opposite is somewhere down here that we cannot conceive of, just like air can't conceive of earth or fire can't conceive of water. They're thesis and antithesis to each other.
Yeah.
So the opposite of female is something way down here that we can't even get our heads around. Opposite of male is something over here. And this is where you get this split perspective. That's not reality. It's not on that bar of reality, but it's on this kind of shifted axis. Okay. Are you starting to see how my idea of the laws goes everywhere? Because then if you take the part that we can see in here, what do we come up with again when they connect? We come up with a triangle, right? So that's the law of three at play in there. And these things begin to rotate and mutate and go around and around and around. So there's a bit of a universal look, and thanks for spinning me up on what you're on about. Was that at all useful? At least maybe give you something more to work on. It's all connected. You know that already.
Yeah.
Maybe you just don't always know how. Yeah. Good. Hi, Orman. Hello, Orman. No? Okay. Right. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you guys. Who else wants to have a go? Who else is on about something? Or
I thought that was really excellently well put over myself. It really was. Yeah. No, which I was that good. Friggin' it. I said, I wish I could put it across like that.
Don't tell him that. He'll want to do it again.
Well, we have the recording. Is that useful? I mean, this today.
That's the point, isn't it? Now, you see, where do you apply all of this to yourself, to your life, or to the things you do? I mean, this is good to learn the structures. It's good to learn criteria, right? It's good to learn what dictates shape and form. But we are an entity that lives with all of these things rather than created them. So we've got to find our way through a whole series of life events, which we're unfamiliar with, and we didn't create. But if we wish to produce something of ourselves, making ourselves, or to become something greater than what we started off as, we've got to use it. So knowing how to use it means you've got to find out what it's all about, haven't you? No?
Yeah.
I wouldn't attempt to go on a trip through the Sahara Desert without being able to fix the bike or the car that I was going in. I know how to fix my shoes if I was walking. What I'm saying is, this is the beginning of a greater work, because it's really where you learn the primaries or the bits and pieces, parts, whatever else, of what goes with what. So you get a jigsaw in front of you, and let's say it's a jigsaw of multicolored patterns.
A what?
Multicolored patterns.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Remember when you were a kid, you never not used to do a squiggly line and then fill in all the different parts with different colors, like a kaleidoscope.
I would actually just make them all fit together.
Eh?
I would just force them till they fit.
So you weren't out firing guns then.
Yeah.
I heard about America. When I first came to America, the first thing I did, I went up to a policeman and said, "Where do I buy the guns?"
Yeah.
I did. I've seen it on the films.
Wild, wild west here.
Yes, but the point is, how do you apply all these things to a life that you live? Bearing in mind,
if our goal is personal development and all those things are trying to give us understanding, how does that fit? He's right. How do you apply all that?
that's Lucy, isn't it? I know it's Lucy.
That was Susan.
Was it? That was Susan. Oh, maybe Lucy's got the same voice then. I remember people's voices, you know. Oh, right, okay, that's fine. Why don't we see you? Is there a camera problem? No.
Can I throw something out here? I think a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. Mike was talking about peeling the onion, going to the core, and sort of the way I see this, peel the onion and you're going to find infinity. What you're going to find there is another onion, another onion, another onion. It's just going. That's one thing. And then the second is in the question of where does this apply to? It applies to infinity. It applies to everything. Mm-hmm. You can take this and break it down, and every aspect. It applies to your breathing. It applies to the first breath you took when you were born. You can control that. You can manage that. It's just kind of amazing. So that's awesome, but it's also daunting. You can't apply infinity, and like that's just such a crazy concept. All right, pick one thing. Pick one.
You know what? I tell you what, Sachin. Before I started dealing with affinity, I like to deal with the reality I'm in and get the best out of that one first. Do you know what I mean? Because it makes sense to me that really you've got to start where you are rather than sort of like, you know, become academic. Academia doesn't take you anywhere except into science, and that's screwed up itself. And science, all science studies, makes a series of corrections over hundreds of years, and then finally, with a bit of luck, it might come to the truth. But myself, I don't have that kind of time. So I always wanted to know what something meant, but meant especially for me. Because if I was going to put myself into it, I would want to know what I was going to be within it, or what it could do for me, wouldn't you? I mean, you know, so what's the first thing in my personal journey was to establish what it is that I'm actually doing. And so I began to realize very soon that what I'd learnt in my upbringing actually didn't bear any relationship to the truth of my life at all. In fact, In fact, I really didn't need it, because what I could do naturally didn't figure with anything to do with the cultural life I was living. I'm not against the culture. I love this culture. You can have teeth out without pain. You know what I mean? And things like that. You don't have to take a bit of string on the doorpost anymore. It's lovely. And you can ride around in a car, you know, and so on and so forth. So nothing wrong with it in that sense. So why not? I'd love a 5-foot telly. You know, what's wrong with that? Maybe you go out to work and you earn it, that's fine. You should buy one. But it isn't going to become the measure of what you actually are, because you're born, you live, and you die. Or something dies in you, or maybe all of it dies in you. I think it depends on what your life has become as to what determines to how you go on. Because life says when your body stops, that's enough. You've had the life. Whether it was accidentally or not, you've had that life. Now, I don't believe, and I've never believed, to be honest with you, that such a thing as a judgment day exists. It's crap. You're going to meet, you know, some strange-looking guy with long hair at the pearly gates. I mean, it's bullshit. I mean, so that's like believing in Father Christmas, and you know what I mean. We do it to please the family, but that's about it, really. When it comes to the reality of it, especially when we were talking about last week, if you remember, those moments where in life you come across these moments yourself, you live through them, like in an accident, where for a period of time you're not yourself. There's someone else in you that's looking at your life, like especially the car crash, say you die. And like lots of people turn around and say, I saw myself dead in the front wheel. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, I like jokes. You've got to be normal. So Diana was walking across the clouds and she bumped into the Queen Mother, right? And the Queen Mother said, oh, Diana, you've got such a beautiful halo. And so Diana turned around and said, it's a steering wheel, you fool, you know. And I said, right, so much for heaven. And you get people to say, oh, it's up there in between the Pleiades and this, that, and the other. Well, I think what they're saying is something different than that, because I've had many of those out-of-body experiences myself, many of them. And I've also seen them happen. And over the years, you come to see a different kind of picture about the nature of life itself and what that life actually is. I finally come to an understanding, which I run on now, is that the human being has within itself a uniqueness. And that uniqueness has two features about it. The first is individuality, and the secondly is identity. The fact we're at planetary level in this great creation is the fact that you woke up, you. I mean, I don't think you'd have much to say about it. Well, you'd have a lot to say about it, really, if you woke up as a blade of grass just before you're about to be mowed by your true self in another life or something stupid like that, right? But you kind of get the idea that the chances of you being you were quite numerous. So the fact of you actually living a life is going to be numerous. The numbers working out is enormous. However, it's you. So what is this entity of self? What is it about? How does it work? Where does it come from? How do you make it? Is it already developed? If it's not, then how do you actually go about applying your life to, if you like, to keep it sort of academic, Sachin, a reality of life in which you will find all of those ingredients that can actually turn you into a greater person at the end of your life, or during to the time to that end of life, so that when your body comes to an end, unlike your car, when you send it to the scrapyard, you don't send the driver with it. There's something standing on the other side that's called the true or the real you. You know, we can lie as much as we like in life, but in truth, the what you are is what it's all about. Because that, I believe, is where the entity of yourself actually sits. Now, it doesn't stand much of a chance in my book of going anywhere in a life if it's shoved into a corner where the options are so limited that it can do nothing but respond. I also mentioned last week, and I wonder what you made of this bit, that, you know, when I look out my window, I live in town, I see everybody. It's been like Piccadilly Circus out there today. Even though it's not Piccadilly Circus, it might as well have been. Crowded. But they're all preoccupied with something. And I think to myself, you see, they think they're having a life, but they're not. There's something else in them that's having a life, and they are the pawn that's carrying it around. So it's the culture that's living in them, and it's not their life. So what the chances are they becoming something in those kind of terms and conditions? So firstly, surely the way ahead would be to start to begin to chip away at those kind of things, to alter the terms and conditions of your possibilities. Now, it's obvious that means you've got to have new learning. I tend to call it relearning, to be honest with you, because you're not stupid. I mean, you've got a huge amount of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can apply it to the event of yourself. Because, excuse me, they don't teach about these things at school, when the greatest influence of your life stems from that time. And I said it last week too, you know, Mark Twain said it, right? Seems American. Thank God my schooling didn't interfere with my education, right? And he was absolutely right. So there is something good in America then, apart from you good people, of course. You might say the same about England, but I mean, you don't live here, do you? Oh yeah, of course they do. Some of them. Yeah, but the point is, what are you going to do? Because at some point in your life, the reality of this is going to come home to you. Now, I get these moments. So I used to be a van driver around London. That is like a living nightmare for van drivers, because London is just, well. And I'm down at the Aldwych, which is near where the Bank of England is and so on. It's really money country. So the big buildings like the Domain, the empires are based there, and there's these little cul-de-sacs or little off-roads, and you go and call them mews, M-E-W-S. Go down that mews there, mate. It's down there. And I'm looking for this old folks home. And I think there's something not right here. It's an old folks home in the centre of London, but trust me, there was one. And I did find it, and I found it down this little road, down the side near the Bank of England. You know, an old folks home next to the Bank of England in a city like London, it doesn't make sense. That's like, you know, having a private house next to Saks in Fifth Avenue or something. I suppose that's a kind of American equivalent, you know? I don't know, I'm not American. But you know the kind of thing I mean, see? So I drove down here, and of course it's at the end, but I turned right, which was a dead end. Now I turned right into a little mews where the lorry just fits in. I've got to back out. I didn't, well, what else? But what caught me was I stopped, and I'm thinking, oh, that was a stupid thing to do. I'm going to have to find someone to see me back, right? And as I look round, there's this woman sitting at the window. This old dear, right? Like this. And not moving. I actually thought it was a picture. Now, I'm kind of like that. I'm curious. I was going to go over and tap the window just to see if it blinked or something, but I better not. Because, you know, well, it's the kind of thing you do, isn't it? See? I once found elementals being cheeky like that. I'll tell you that story one day. So, I went towards the window, and her face started to change. Now, when I went in, I finally went in the door, made the delivery. I was curious. I said, "This woman sitting at the window." He said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, she's been sitting there for the last 3 years. I said, oh, right. So she's real then. It's not a cardboard cutout of somebody. No, it's real, yeah. Now, you imagine it. She's sitting there at the window down a little offshoot from a mews in the middle of all this big towering. All she's got is the back end of another big building. And that's it. That's it. For years, she's been sitting there. That's it. Now, I reckon you'd be lucky if one person a month goes down that little bit. That's a life. That's a life. And do you know how many people end up like that in their life? Millions upon millions upon millions. Really, seriously. And it scared the hell out of me because I thought, there is no way I'm going to end up like that. Right? I don't care all the reasons for it, etc., etc., etc. So it's a question about, well, who does actually own your life? Because I could show you a way in which I could show you actually straight and easy that you don't actually own your life. And you'll be surprised and shocked at the answers and the reasoning as well. Because it won't fit with your idea of life. So somewhere along that, in this new learning, there's an issue of the self that comes into it. And it's at that moment then, when all of this kind of work, which Pierce brilliantly done, I might say, that was excellent, to be honest with you. It's trying to explain the fundamentals and primaries. And as it goes on, to show you how it relates to a life where that kind of consequence of life becomes a diminishing part of life for them, rather than the event or the awakening or the application of greater abilities in oneself, which are naturally there, but you've never used. The culture doesn't require it. Added to your lifestyle so that when you get to that last day, whenever it is, you know exactly where you're going. You know exactly who and what you are, and you know exactly what it is you can do before it happens. So all that happens at that one particular moment is you lose your body, but you don't lose anything else. Now, I make you this promise. This is what this work is all about. And it's not that hard to do either, is it, Pierce? Seriously. Would you say that's fair? You better not there, otherwise I'll be in trouble, yeah?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So taking all of this, what's happened so far, into the aspect of oneself, you as a person, as an individual, should be the owner of your life, and that life addressed to the most natural of its abilities and processes, because that's where your greatest possibility of development, ascension, and anything else you want to add on top of that is possible for you. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to do what millions and millions and millions and millions of other people do, and that's go round in the same circle. You'll live by your own choice at the end of a cul-de-sac. That in England is like a road which stops, and it's got a circle at the end, and you've got all the houses round, and there's only one way in, and there's only one way out, and that's the way you came in, see? Well, thy options in life are trillionfold. And the things I can do, what are in throughout the whole esoteric domain of this world, and more. And I do, and I profoundly know for a fact, not believe, I said last week, you know, when does belief stop and you become what you believe in? Or you make it possible that it is the case, right? That what you believe in is you. That it is possible to rise above the planetary nature of our life here. Because I don't think that's all our existence is, just this life. We live a series of life here, reincarnation included. That's how we manage to get from one body to another, right? So all of those subject matters are primary in my book, what you need to know thoroughly all about, because it applies to your actual life itself. Right? Makes sense to me that way. Uh-oh.
Okay, so Orman, how
Yeah.
do you break the cycle?
How do you, I'm sorry, darling, a word went there. What was that? How do you what the what?
How do you break the cycle?
The cycle
get out.
of, what you mean? How do you come to this in yourself, you mean? Okay, how do you break the cycle of events in your life? Yes, go around the same circle. You mean the circle? Yeah, right. Well, come on, Pierce. You want to whack on with this, or shall I do it? I don't mind. She's asked me. I lead in.
Yeah, sure.
Then it comes to, in the first place, finding ways to accept the idea of it first. Because what could be more stupid in my book? Now, this is not meant to be insulting, okay? If I can't say something and you see it's not an insult, all right? But it could seem like it. I don't want to insult nobody. Right? The stupidity of someone who doesn't know what they are, turning around and saying, I'm going to go on a personal development course, and deciding from the basis they don't know what they are, what's good for themselves. You see? I can't believe this. You'll have to take over from me. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to answer this because
It's okay.
I couldn't get hold of her to tell her it was 6 o'clock. Excuse me.
Yeah, so yeah, there's an expression. If you don't know where you're going, any road will do, right? I think, Orman, I can't tell if you're still talking to me or can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I think Orman's on the phone. I think we're good.
Okay, good.
He's on a Skype call.
He usually switches cameras so I can see that I'm actually the one. So a couple things come to mind, Susan. How do you break the cycle? The first, obvious, most important aspect is just realizing that you are in one. And as Orman was talking, one word kept popping into my head, which was, and yet, 2 words, and yet, because it's very easy to kind of come across this sort of view and take this stance of like, oh, the culture's evil, and we don't live our natural lives, and all of this things impressed upon me from education and from society and from peers and from religion and morals and all this type of stuff. It's easy to take that stance and say that is useless, and something magical inside me called my core, my essence, whatever you want to call it, my natural self, is all that matters. And yet, if that was the case, then every country bumpkin, do you know the expression? Every country bumpkin would be enlightened, and yet they're not, right? Even though in certain situations like that, like someone can actually live a more natural life. They don't have all of this technology and everything going on. They don't have all the education. They don't have all this type of stuff. They live a very natural life. And yet, from a development standpoint, it's just different. It's not higher or lower. Speaking of like a personal development journey, right? And I drew this up before. I drew this up on the board before because it's very good illustration from the standpoint. It's an egg. It's my version of an egg. Can you see it? I'll walk back to it. My camera follows me around. It's an egg. And I liken this. I liken the egg to an undeveloped person or a person that's not on a development journey. Because what's the important part of the egg, right? What part becomes the chicken? It's the yolk. It's the center. It's the core that becomes that new being. But you can't just have a yolk and expect it to become a chicken. It has to be surrounded by something else. And this is where I see the aspect of, instead of being subject to the culture and subject to one's education and subject to, all of these external influences to ourselves, the first step in a personal development journey is to begin to digest and use those. Right? So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with education. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with, religion. There's nothing wrong with any of this type of stuff. But most people just remain an egg in their lives. They don't ever actually get to that point where they begin to grow. And if you look at a chicken or any other creature and compare it to an egg, would you ever guess, if you didn't know, would you ever guess that this came from this? Susan, is that beginning to answer? I can elaborate on this, and I actually kind of feel like I should, because part of the process of development, I guess the first step is to recognize that you're in this cycle. Yeah? The second step is really to begin to use life to your advantage instead of it using you. We live in a culture, we live in a society where we are treated more like a commodity than we are like a being. And we can't help that. That is just the way it works. And very few people have the opportunity, to go join a monastery. And even if you did, I doubt it would work in this day and age anymore. So we have to be a bit more clever. We have to find new ways to actually be able to engage in this development journey. Now, I think your next question is, okay, Pierce, how do you do it, right? Because I'm sensing this kind of practicality, yeah? The way that you do it is by, well, first of all, like Orman said, you have to come across this kind of, new knowledge, new learning. But that in and of itself can go in one of two buckets. It can just go in the bucket of, everything else you've learned and kind of get mixed up in how to drive a car and everything else in life, or it can go in a new bucket. And this new bucket is the chosen self, right? This is why my name in the cultural life is not Pierce. I actually chose Pierce because it is a name by which I can begin, it's my bucket. I can begin to attach works to, all right? And everything that I put in Pierce is something intentional. Every work that goes on in Pierce is something intentional because that's my life, right? This is the aspect of this yolk, eating the albumum, I think is what it's called, the white of the egg. It breaks things apart. It nourishes itself, and eventually it becomes something greater, something more than it was. The how you do it is so simple. It's really just begin to watch things. I'll give you an example. We so seldom actually look at anything with the core of us. And I had an experience about a year ago that really solidified this for me, although it's something I've been working on for a long time. But I was out in my backyard and having a very deep sense of just awareness of myself. And I decided to go up and look at this tree that has been in my backyard for years, well, longer than I've been alive, right? But it's been there. I've walked past it 1,000 times, perhaps. And yet, if I was sitting inside, I would not be able to describe this tree. I wouldn't be able to tell you how many branches it had. I wouldn't be able to tell you how, how it's configured, how tall it is, none of this type of stuff, because I never actually saw it with my being. And I think everyone's always looking for this, do this magical formula and you're going to begin on this development journey. But really, it starts with collecting yourself and actually living the life that you're in, right? And so I looked at this tree and it literally opened up so much to me. It started off as just like counting things and observing the colors and and I came up and I examined a leaf and really tried to understand the shape and how it was made and all this type of stuff. Yeah. But after doing that, all this other stuff started pouring in. I started seeing the natural laws, actually not just seeing the natural laws as I had been taught, but learning them. Because where else are you going to go to learn the natural laws but in nature, right? You're not going to learn natural laws, you know, wherever, in some unnatural situation. So time and time again, I keep coming back to this point of you have to decide for yourself if you think there is an order to this universe. And if you decide that there is an order and laws in this universe, then you have to decide B, if you're also a manifestation of those laws. And if you decide that you're a manifestation of those laws, in other words, they live within you, then you should know everything about them, right? You have to know the machinery that you're working with. Where are we, Susan? Did that help at all? Push back if you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. I mean, we could go on forever. I think
I tend to.
essentially what I'm looking for is, I don't know. I think there's the, you know, the body, soul, and the spirit. I have my soul, you know, that's my personality, my thoughts, my beliefs, blah, 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 blah. But then there's that spirit realmy thing out there that if I could just connect to that, the answers would come. They would just come, but I can't connect to it somehow. I know there's a realm out there.
Well, okay, let's define some terms first. Body, we can all agree on, right? It's always been interesting to me. I ask people, you know, you can raise your right hand, and everybody in the room can raise their right hand, and then you know, I say, you know, raise the yellow part of your soul, and no one knows what that means, right? And yet we say, oh yeah, I've got a soul, I have a spirit. So Susan, what do you mean by soul? What do you mean by spirit? You say that you can connect to your soul already. If you're there, if you've got that already, then you're quite far along, to be honest, in my book.
Well, like you said, you have to define the terms, and
Yeah.
it took me a while to define the term of what a soul is. And through my studying, I've concluded it's really your personality. It's your history, your upbringing, your likes, your dislikes. It's your soul. I'm Susan Swanson. All that goes with that. And you're Pierce. Well, maybe the guy before you renamed yourself. And what all goes with that, you know, your upbringing, your parents, your siblings, your environment, everything. But then there's another realm out there, apart from your soul. And that is what we're here to connect with. And that's what I want to connect with, but I can't yet so far.
Let's do this then.
Can I ask a leading question here? Maybe Pierce, you can add to it. So I heard Susan say there's this another thing that is something different. Why do you think it's different, and why does it need to be different? Do you think it's already in you? Maybe you are it already?
Are you asking me or Susan?
I'm just throwing this point of discussion
Throwing it out. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to do something, because this is the problem with this sort of structure. Because we have so much background, so much history with things, I can be talking about my soul and you can be talking about your soul, and we could be talking about two completely different things. So I want to throw words for now, like soul, spirit, you know, all of these types of things. I want to throw them out. I want to throw them out for a minute, because maybe we can, because they're so loaded, right, in the culture, but maybe we can look at something like natural self and higher self. Does that somewhat resonate, Susan, so that we can at least start talking about the same thing?
No, there's no higher moral soul. Your soul is your soul. That's it. It's just like a loaf of bread is a loaf of bread.
So pick another word for spirit then.
It's not true. It's not true. Let's see. This is the point. Okay. What do you call a soul? What is your soul? Then, personally, I step right back from the use of the term and the word soul. You are something else inside yourself. You have a core. And that core is the center in which all of the activities of your life stem from. Now, there are some very easy esoteric works, like works on what they call centers and things of this kind, which explain the behavior that goes on in you. But somewhere in the center of yourself is the entity of you, the actuality of yourself, not a soul, but the you of you, the bit that's looking out the eyes that says, this is me, okay? So you could come to the conclusion and leave it simply that the soul is an enclosure in which such a thing exists, that is yours, it's you, the bit of you. And it's that bit that should be living the life in all of the aspects of yourself that haven't been fiddled with, changed, altered, indoctrinated, screwed in, twisted, broken, and God knows what, that the human race has done to the human event over all of the cultures that have existed of human, thousands of them, over thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. And you woke up on the day you were born at the end of that, which history dumped you with. You as you are is the end result of all of that. If the human race had been a continuum of culture, we would all be flying around the universe like aliens do, etc., much older cultures than us. But what you've had is a history of accident, misuse. I mean, you can see, you take the ancient Egyptians, all right? Now, they were responsible for a great deal of damage that we now live like we do because of. You have got 5 natural processes and abilities that are totally obsolete in your life at this moment now. And I'll tell you what they are. And you might think you know what I'm talking about. This is nothing nasty in this, I'm just straight. For an example, clairvoyance, empathy, mediumship, sensitivity. Now I'm talking about the art of a sensitive. And what you call psychic is actually called the works of the psyche. Because the psychic belongs to the mental life, all right? Now, they should be a natural part of what everything you do, because those 5 processes alone are your connection to the natural order of life outside that you're talking about. Because what you're talking about, that big other domain that's outside there, is outside of the reach of human, because it wasn't that human is working towards it. Human stepped back from that, which was in itself part of what you are, or were, or should have been. So in the first place, how you break the cycle, I would say, is that you begin to learn those arts and reintroduce them back into your life, even though they have absolutely no cultural use whatsoever, because they are totally based in your relationship, connection, and in the containment in yourself of that natural world that is written up there on the board, okay, which should belong to you by natural right of life, from which you have been separated, which is one of the damages left by the ancient Egyptians. I've always claimed that the human being has, and this is a term that Pierce used, a higher life. But the higher life should have been really the normal life. It's only higher because there was a fall of man, not truly explained in its rightfulness by the Bible or any other book on the occult especially. All the transcendental works of life are nothing more than an enforcement of something that one could do naturally. But you can't do that. And if you can't do that and you've never learnt it, you never know about it, you are living in the smallest, minorityist self of self that it's possible to do. And yet we call ourselves glorious. We say we're the best there is in the world, you know. But this particular species of life, us, is only dominant because it's intelligently predatory. All right, that's all. And when you look at the figures of what they do to keep the human race alive, you know, in Great Britain alone, 20 million chickens a week end up in restaurants and on the breakfast table, etc. The numbers are horrific. Now, all right, that's 9,000 million people, not all in England, thank God, although most of them are. On the dole, that kind of thing. But just to return those processes back in. So the beginning of the journey is to start restoring those particular abilities back into yourself, because it so changes your view of life from the standpoint of your personal self, from the issue of yourself. Maybe not your job, because you need to live, but certainly from the standpoint of what it is you see, what it is you learn, what it is you've awoken to, what you now call conscious. At a later date, you won't call that conscious. You'll call that semi-conscious, I promise you. Because there is a whole world of new learning, new art and new ability sitting there that actually naturally belongs to you, that very few people in their life make claim upon, when it, in the order of life, belongs to them. And it belongs to them individually too. And you say, well, what good is clairvoyance in this life? Oh, well, you'll be surprised. In the culture, well, if you worked on Wall Street, I suppose it would do you a great deal of good, right? But you can't use it in Wall Street, can you? You can't get a job because you're a clairvoyant, you know, unless you want to be a clairvoyant out on the street, right? Open up a Madame Blave parlor, we call them. Gypsy Rose Lee caravan stuff, you know, that kind of thing. Recently, Palm and the rest of it. And it's just attempts, a mild attempt at forcing the issue on a process which has its own natural way of things. And it's those natural ways of it that is the learning process. And we begin by explaining how they fall, why they are like they are, because there is a criteria and a template of natural things, we call it natural laws, that explain why it works the way it works. See? So there's fundamental primary learning, and then comes the fun of it, when you start to practically put it back into your life. In the 60s and 70s, and we were doing this, we go to the most incredibly contorted means to do it, because we were in a pitched battle with the things that were running our life when they shouldn't have been. But in this day and age, sorry?
I think you have something there, but I think those things about like the variance and the empathy and those things to get back into your whatever, I think those lead, if you could do that, they lead to that realm I'm looking for.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the same thing a different way. I'm saying that this is the beginning of re-establishing.
But I only got 3 of your 5. I only got...
Well, you know, how many years have you got? Because if you just do on these 5, I could keep you here for years, really. I really could. The thing about it is you only need a certain amount yourself, and then it carries on because you carry on. So our thing is we show you how to do it for yourself. That's how it should be. But you're going to have difficulties because not everything we say you're going to take in, because it runs against your own indoctrination, your own schooling, your own education. And like I say, somewhere along the line, we have to show you, or we need time to show you how to alter what you've learned so that it fits with your ability. Because having an ability like that, you won't know how, you don't know what it is it does. So there's also that side of it. I mean, I can tell you mechanically how clairvoyance works. It's possible for every single human being in the world to be all of these 5. You understand? I can show you because it works on natural laws. It's very simple. And it was the same as the piano tuner. That is the simplest way to see clairvoyance. Because when he bangs with the hammer, you know, bing, a C, it's got a C tuning fork there and it rings. And Yeah, that's it. And it tunes it finally into the note itself, the vibration, the level, the octave, whatever word you want to put on it. And he does that throughout the whole octave of things. And that's in a sense what we do with ourselves. We put ourselves on the same level and in tune with those particular domains of activities of life as well, with its learning, etc. So we now, as an entity of self, begin to grow, but we grow in the natural order of things rather than the culturally designated order of things, which I wouldn't trust as far as I can throw it, to be honest with you, because they can't do it. It doesn't have it in it. So I'm not against it, but I say it doesn't have to be your master of life, does it? So clairvoyance is easy. It's to do with linkage. It's to do with your brother's got your blood. I'm sorry if you've got a brother or not. I mean, any relation of yours has got your blood. So if you are sensitive enough, if their blood becomes supercharged, it'll pour from them into you. And like I gave the example last week of like the Incredible Hulk, right? There's a man who played, he died recently, didn't he? Yes? Can't even think of what his name was. It was an American actor. But he said he woke up on set one day, worried about his uncle, who he hadn't seen for years. And his uncle was quite a pure man. He wore white suits and all sorts of things. Anyway, during shooting the scene later that day, they came in and they stopped the scene. So we knew, I obviously tell you, but just received information your uncle's died. Now, that's the kind of thing I mean. That's what we're after. We're after that. That bit is the doorway in. Because how did that work? Now, I grabbed hold of things like that when I was young, and I would not let it go until I found the answer. And once you know how the answer, or you see the answer, you see how it works as well. So if you know how it works, you can initiate, start or stop, in other words, the process in yourself at any given time. But you'll find, like, it is so common in organic life to be any of those five or all of them. I mean, dogs are totally clairvoyant. They really are. They haven't given up that ability in themselves. Well, because they don't have a personality, as I call it. They don't have a culture of, of behavior that gets in the way of it. Because to change the natural order of yourself and take on a culture, something in you has got to pay the price. Now, also, in the last culture that lived, which you might have been one of, because if you've had previous lives to this, you could have been an ancient Egyptian. Now, I'm not talking about, certain parts of your country, right, where everyone who goes for their past life reading is an old Egyptian princess. I think there must have been more Egyptian princesses than there were people, but that's business, isn't it? It's money, it's business, right? I knew a guy who used to sell stones from Atlanta. He got sent to prison for 3 years for that. That was in New Zealand. And where did he pick the stones up? From the side of the road, before he went in to do his so-called psychic issue. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. It's how it is. But you make a fool of these people in the end, not because you choose to or you're trying to, but because when it comes to the natural ability or the natural process within you, it happens in such a natural way. It is always absolutely accurate, always. And it comes along with a presence of being. It comes along with a picture. It comes along, even sometimes if it's powerful enough, with the persona of the person themselves. And then there are different domains that we live in, that we have because we actually live and we process and we burn and we've got an aura and electrical, magnetic life, etc., that these particular processes work in those domains as well. So it is possible to have a psychic astral embodiment. But then you get people, they take it to the extreme in life. I mean, it's business. So they call themselves a psychic medium. Oh, for God's sake, followed by a GSC or a degree or a sitting in guilds or something, or a fellowship of something. I mean, that's supposed to qualify their ability, right? But their ability is very minor, very juvenile, very often, and really, it doesn't work for sensationalism. It really doesn't. Because there are works that relate to the human event, the cultural nature of oneself just cannot deal with it. You need a different kind of person in you to do that in advanced works on things. So, yeah, okay, I've got a note here. I'm running on your time, aren't I? So this is the kind of thing that we do, and we do it all the time, and it works. I can honestly say to you, like even with healing, I mean, I've got to be well over 100,000 people that I've shown the basics of healing on, and they can all do it. At least that, all over the world. So it's proven, it's tried, it's been tested many, many times. So we are a contested work because we don't back off from it at all, ever. Because otherwise, why are we doing it then? You see? Sorry, you're looking anxious, Pierce. Is everything all right?
Yeah,
I saw
you
a little note.
Your own
Somebody has to go, is that right?
Good. No, I'm fine.
Oh, okay. Right. It was Sachin, was it? You're right, Sachin.
I'm good. I just have to drop in a couple of minutes for another call.
Oh, okay. Then. So if you just sort of disappear, we'll
Okay,
see you next time.
Then wait, before you go, Sachin, because this applies. The hardest part is actually sometimes just trusting yourself. And so I want you to try something because it does work and it will push against that aspect. Not just you. I mean, take it up if you want to. You don't have to. Get a deck of cards. And, people are like, sort between red and black, red and black, red and black, that kind of thing. It doesn't actually work that way, but it does work through the tuning fork aspect. Pick a red card and hold it in your left hand. Anywhere on your body actually works eventually, but pick a red card and hold it in your left hand, and then go through the deck and see if you can, without looking, separate the reds from the blacks. Now, after about the third or fourth time, you'll be able to do this because it's that tuning fork thing. Play with things like this. Like seriously, just play with it. It actually does work. Now, that's not the point. You don't need a career separating black from red cards, but the point is to open up a little bit, trust yourself a little bit more, and actually train your faculties to be able to do things like this based on the principles of the laws. What I'm saying here is this is a tuning fork principle. So give it a shot.
It's actually bringing it into the domain of your activities of life, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
I tend to, everybody does it different ways, but we all do the same way, but we also have different levels in it all. So, yeah, you get to a point where, like doing what I do, and that is, I find myself doing it. So for me, I stay awake because that can happen at any time. So I've struggled with this too. Even after I've been at this sort of work now. Well, I'm 74 and I started when I was 6, so 68 years. 68 years. Amazing. Jesus. Well, he never got to 68, did he? 78, 74. What I'm saying is that you find yourself in doing these sort of things. No, not on a bus. And that's the other thing. When you start doing this kind of thing, like Pierce was saying, especially when you increase your options by doing things of that kind, right? I used to sit right at the window, draw the curtains. People used to think I was mad. And I used to try and visualize the next person coming around that corner. I was totally wrong. I mean, for weeks. Yeah. And then I started getting it right. Yeah. And it was surprising. I was elated. I always went out down the pub for a drink, that kind of thing. And it started to work. And then I found it turning up in all sorts of other aspects. And I became aware of something moments before it started, before it happened. Now, this isn't clairvoyance. This is something else. Okay? This is to do with the psyche of self, not the psychic, but the psyche. Psychic is very much more powerful than that. So it's one thing kicks off another. And it got to a point where, like, I got on a bus, a London bus, and there's a pole. You're standing there, right? And as much as, you know, London buses go like, you're standing there like this, you know, you got to get, you're better off on board a ship. You know, it's really like that, see? And I grabbed the pole, and this woman next to me grabbed the pole at the same time, but we're both in an elated condition because this was a bit of a rough ride. And I just had this picture. I knew her name. I knew she was pregnant. I knew she was on her way to tell her boyfriend. And I saw pictures of her, of the place she lived. She lived with 2 other people in this particular house. And I even saw the color of the front door. Now, that's called psychometry. And I actually told her, I don't normally say these things to people. Well, no, what I find out because it happens, you know. And I told her exactly what I did. She said, who the hell are you? Are you following me? Now, I'm very serious. She really did. And I think she backed off as she was saying it. She was really, truly worried. You know, some stranger accosted you with that, especially about the fact she was pregnant and that was on her way to tell her, which is exactly what she was doing. Now, that was consequential to the efforts I made to engender those kind of things in my life or bring them into my life. Better still, to reinitiate them because they're already there. You already have the processes in you. All you got to do is set them on fire. It is as simple as that, I promise you. You're naturally born with that. And then all these other things start to happen. And then after a while, you're trying to get the idea you might be a little bit crazy, you know? Maybe it's just driving around the bend. And that's what I said last week, didn't I? There's 2 kinds of people in the world. Lucy, Susan. Yeah. Those that drive themselves around the bend and those that go around naturally. So you just got to decide which one you belong to, you know what I mean? Which camp you're in. Hmm?
Well, I see what you're saying, but
Yeah.
one of the books I study, of course, is the Bible, and it calls it gifts. Different peoples have different gifts so that one body can work together to do a thing. So
Well, I know a bigger book, I know a greater book than the Bible. Okay. And that book is the esoteric domain, the world, the higher life of life itself. The Bible is a translation of an event that took place that isn't even religious. It wasn't even a religious event. And it was written hundreds of years after the so-called guy. Because, and I was on radio once arguing this with the DJ, right? It was one of those talk programs. I got invited on this. Yeah? And he said to me, well, come on, he said, there's 1,500 million Christians. You're going to tell me they're all wrong? I said, what makes you think they can't be? It's the only answer I could give on that one. What makes you think they can't be wrong? Huh? And you know, there was such a flood of complaints of that. It would have set the world on fire. Hmm?
Yeah,
You know,
the Bible
you talk to
says,
an ancient Egyptian about ancient Egyptian gods, they'll tell you that the Book of Thoth is the only true book in creation. I don't run my life by a book. Never did, never will. To me, it's got to be real. It's got to be there. And it's got to have some connection to the purpose that I live for or my purpose of life, which I try to make in line with the greater issue of things. And that's the planetary purpose of it, because you live here to serve a planetary purpose. Creation wasn't made, as Christianity says, for the human being. I think it's very much the other way around. But it's an issue which really goes nowhere because it doesn't help improve what you can do. I mean, if you're going to get this from Jesus, and there's no way you're going to end up with it, is there? Not really, because you'll never meet him anyway. You see, this is the thing, and it's maybe a clever answer for it, but I think the whole subject matter is a bit twisted in this day and age.
you said that Christians said that there's so many Christians out there. How can they all be wrong? Well, the Bible says many are the roads, but few there be that find it.
Well, have you ever awoken to what that actually ever means? Because, you know, the nature of awakenedness isn't something that comes out of the Bible. It's an actual natural process.
To me, that fits right in. Few that be there find it. I mean,
Well,
connect-
well, then what is it saying? That's not religious. That's to do with the esoteric value of life. It's not to do with religion.
I just
So,
said
but
it.
people are taking, well, I can take a lot of things that I say and turn it into a religion, you know, thus saith this person, thus saith the elemental whose name actually happens to be Lord, all right, thus saith this, thus saith that. It doesn't mean that it's actually for real, even if there's 20 million people following it. It doesn't mean to say it's right. You see, what it comes down to in the end is what you are at the end of it. What you are in your life and what the works of your life amount to be at the end of it, because they talk about judgment day. You do it our way or you go to hell, right? That's it. That was one of the reasons I didn't pick up on religion much, okay? Because to me, it was never real. How can you, it talks about one value of life on one hand, and then contradicts it with a threat of life if you don't. So, you know, how do you go along with that? You think that's right? Because I don't believe there is such a thing as a judgment day. And then when we ended up in a big argument one day, me and somebody else, with Cardinal Heenan. Now, he was the primate of England as far as the Catholic Church was concerned, okay? Because we accused him of cannibalism. Really? When you look at the Eucharist, the Holy Orders, the Eucharistic rite, you know, communion. You drink the wine, you eat the bread. Ritually, that is eating flesh and drinking blood. Now, is it real or isn't it? Do you know what he said? Oh, it's only symbolic. I mean, what the fucking was the point of the service then? I'm sorry. I mean, to me, I can go for 1,000 arguments like that. But it didn't make any difference to the event of my life because I still couldn't do anything because of it. It just meant that they're saying you belong to us, or I am Christian, therefore you are Christian, because, you know, they defeat themselves as well, because I don't know if you know this, that the Catholics, there's only Catholics in this world. Everyone is a Catholic. Sorry if it upsets you, anybody, but they say there's two kinds, practicing and non-practicing. That's how they get away with it. That's their view of it. And yet when you look at their practicings, why do they pull the bar across the thing? See, there's a lot in it that actually belongs to the esoteric and the occult and even the unseen worlds, that secret societies, because most of these priests are Masonic as well. Yeah. What I'm saying is, yeah, but this is my own view. You're entitled to your own views, okay? But I base where I stand on the results of the work that I've had. And these are the issues that we need to discuss. And we sometimes, I tell you, sometimes we have quite a barney about it, but it's not a nasty thing. I mean, we don't fight. We have these things called open forums. Like the old ancient, you know, Roman Senates had that, didn't they? Used to open forum everything as we discussed out to its final length. Because until you're happy with the point of view, I don't think people would be prepared to adopt it or take it on. Now, if you have a calling for a greater life or a domain that's out there that sits closer at the center of yourself, the roadway to that is that you've got to make yourself more attractive to it and go find it rather than expect it to come to you, because it never will. It never will, Susan. Really, seriously, it never will. You know?
What does Torsten think of all this?
Torsten.
Okay.
Oh, Torsten, sorry.
Yeah. Well, these are very basic, fundamental views, and I like the discussion here because it's really, really fundamental. It's the thing about what is natural in me, in myself, and what is unnatural, which has been indoctrinated into myself in school, in the parents, in religion, in whatever you take. And it's really to find out what is, because I know that even when I go back as a boy, I knew that at a certain moment I was lied at. Someone was lying. Some of the adults was lying to me, and I was, why is that? Why is someone lying to me? Because I knew somehow inside that this is not true, or I was treated in a certain way, which I felt very unnatural. I felt something like it's aggressive, or it's rough, it's coarse, and why is this happening? Even as a boy, yeah, and so. And I knew also there is something in myself which is not that coarse, which is what I today will call human, which is soft in its nature. It's not rough. It has a different quality to it. So I don't know. I mean, I can go now into all sorts of things, but
when you got this, I mean, do you see things?
Well, yeah, sometimes. Well, what do you mean?
I mean, do you see colors or like auras and things of that kind?
I have, but it's most of the
I
time
mean,
off.
if you was walking down the street,
Yeah.
and you saw someone walking towards you, and they were covered in red.
Okay.
You know,
yeah. Yeah.
The closer they got, you get this kind of tension that occurs.
Yeah.
And you know for a fact they're angry. Well, not
exactly.
only that, you could take it to the next level, because you can prove they are, because you can see it there. You can see it in their aura, which means it's in them. Yes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the next stage up, isn't it? You see.
Yeah, it is.
The next stage on, you might say. But then that's natural for all things. I mean, the dogs see red, they see anger, they see all different colors. Dogs never gave up their ability to see things, especially auras.
Yeah.
So a dog might come, behave towards you, not because they like your face, but because they see something about you that you're not aware is presently being seen by it. So it puts another slant on human behavior, or even your relationship with things, even to the point where you could turn around and say that this also explains, at least in its beginnings, some of the behaviors of different cultures, where their reverence for certain parts of organic life, like a tree as an example, dictated a kind of a religious approach to it in such a way it might as well have been, because like some kind of Indian tribes, they liked, or they actually didn't worship it, but they had the greatest respect for a particular kind of tree, because they said that it was inhabited by another kind of life which can only be seen in relation to the tree. And they said, in ordinary terms, and I use ordinary terms for the moment, that they saw the soul of something as well as the tree.
Mm-hmm.
That lived in the tree, literally, that lived in organic life in the general sense, Mm-hmm. And these are natural abilities. It's also very easy to do that. It really is simply easy. But for a gardener, I suppose that would be one up in their life. For others who are interested in the unseen worlds, it would be the beginning of a journey, because your eyes can do this. They can do this, but they're never used for that. So they really have never been trained for such a thing, right? So you can't fool me in two areas now, because I'm like you. I know I can sense the vibrations from people, and I can also see it there. I see it there. You can see cancer in people because of its color and the shape of something. Do you understand? You can see it, and so can animals. But they've not given it up. for a cultural life. You understand? They're still as they were, using the same things all the time. And these are the worlds that Pierce was talking about earlier on that relate to a development or a journey towards the higher life of the actual person themselves. These become normal, which leads you to something of a greater ascent or event in one's own life. So I was just wondering whether or not you actually saw things as well. You see things, Pierce?
Oh, yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Tell us. Huh.
Yeah.
Just a question, Orman, because
Yeah.
you said something, I mean, I don't know if I should ask this today and now open publicly, but is there anything in your stomach not okay? I mean, you
Anything in my stomach that's not okay, right?
Yes.
I'll tell you. I went in for an a camera. They stuck a camera down my pipes, right?
Okay.
Last week.
Okay.
And because I do so much talking, because I'm talking to people like this all the time, you see. And I was worried about cancer of the throat because I was getting problems.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they stuck it down my voice box, that's fine, and put it down my esophagus. And they went through my esophagus into my stomach, and they were fiddling about. I was watching it on a computer screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they weren't happy with that, so they went down my duodenum, and they ended up 4 inches into my small intestines. I mean, it was like from here to the other end of the room and back. I mean, like shoving this pipe down my throat like this. And then they came out of it and they said, now, we're going to take some. They took 8 biopsies from my duodenum. They said, your pipes are all right, your stomach's all right, your voice box is all right, but your duodenum is a problem because there's a lump there, but we're very suspicious. And it's ulcerated. So we took their biopsies. And then they said, oh, we found something else that you didn't come with, but we now know you've got because we've just done the examination. And they discovered I've got an operable hiatus hernia. I didn't even know about it. I didn't. And I've been wondering why I've been getting these kind of pains in my stomach and problems with it. And it's all been caused by this hiatus hernia and the ulcer on it. And the ulcer they were suspicious of because certain kinds of cancer start like that, you see.
Yeah.
Because I do have cancer anyway, but that's on something else. And so, yes, I've got problems in that area. Let's put it
Okay, that's what I picked up. Just wanted to ask, and sorry if I made it public.
No,
so.
I don't mind. I don't care. No, as long as you don't ask me what color underpants I've got and how much I've got in the bank, that's fine.
Okay.
Mike, what sense is that? How would you? What's the term? How would you describe that sense? Because this is where things in the culture kind of become very loose and ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
Most people would just say, that's just, I don't know. I mean, most people. People would say, oh, he's got a clairvoyant knowing about this, but then, it's also clairvoyant this and this and this and this and this. How would you attribute that sense, Mike?
Yeah, well, starts of it, that particular one's not clairvoyant because clairvoyant's to do with down the bloodlines or across blood and stuff. But yeah, it's certainly part of the natural order of things. We are, that's right, the empath rather than the
Torsten is an empath. You can see that. I can see that.
Yes, but no. So, but like I say, it's that thing that we were saying earlier on about divinatory abilities and things, is that they are intrinsic to the core of what we are.
That's right.
But we're taught not to take notice of them. We're taught to.
But in
I mean in general, in a cultural sense, because the culture has. Well, it's easier for a culture to lie to you if you don't have those abilities. For a start, much easier for a culture to lie to you, because it can trick your eyes and it can trick your ears, and it can trick the upfront senses. But it's much harder if you can recognize that this is what's going on, so it can impose upon those things. So if we've got our own natural, we'll say divinity for want of a word, it's easier, from the thing that Orman was saying earlier, it's much easier for a religion to sit upon that, to take ownership, to hijack that and say, right, we want that. We want all of these hundreds and thousands of people, and say, we want them to have that connection to creation for us. We want to sideline that energy towards us. So we'll give them this is what you are supposed to believe. Here's our book, yeah, and they even impose on you that it's a sin to look beyond that book. I mean, in the sort of 9th century, yeah, the Christian church moved its Sabbath from the Saturday to the Sunday and excommunicated anybody that continued to study the Torah. Yeah, because we want to be a separate identity now, because churches and religions build their identities by taking over a group of people's individuality and pointing them in the direction they want it to go.
The dynamo.
Yeah. And so it's better for them to claim squatters' rights within our own natural divinity. Yeah. And the divinations are obviously a lower octave towards that. Yeah. And it's that, like I say, the empathy that Torsten showed there. Yeah. Natural abilities, it's here for us all to see, a prime example of it in action.
Yes, but that
And
can
we
be
all
developed, you see, can't it? That empathy can be developed. But also, it needs rebalancing against the other 5, the other 4.
Yeah.
Because, there's a whole unit there. And if you stand on 4 feet and one's taken away, you fall over. That's it. So you're limited in the end by that empathy, because it's the only thing that carries the vitality of it, when that vitality belongs to other things as well. So our view on all of that is very simple. We prefer to be good all-rounders rather than totally specialized at one thing. You understand? So I wouldn't just be an empath, because for me that's very lopsided, even though I'd rather keep the empath than not have it. The empathic nature, process, ability. But I'd go in pursuit of everything else that belongs to it too, because I'd rather be good at all of it rather than just one bit of it, because I'm limited. It's a limitation on me. And there's no place for it in society. You even see them in England, I'm sorry, but consultant medium. Now, how about that? It takes 3 weeks appointment to see him as well. Medical, right? Consultant medical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you're distressed. Carry on, mate.
No.
Didn't mean to hijack it, right?
No.
Fair enough. I mean, Susan's points are valid. It's a valid conversation. It's fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to throw one kind of practical bit into this as well. I was reminded of it when we were talking, because even without the intention of doing so, we often will have these moments of mediumistic behavior that rests with us, or clairvoyant behavior that manifests, and so on and so forth, right? And it can be missed, and it can also be difficult to repeat it. And so, just from a very practical note, anytime something like this happens to you, pick something in advance, like, touch your earlobe, right? Just some sort of physical link where you don't have to be weird about it, so that everyone in the in the room is like, what's this person doing? But when you have something like that, you can just do this. And here's what happens over time. This is one of mine, by the way. What happens over time is that each time you have one of those types of processes happen within you, you do this, you begin to create this link in yourself, so that when you wish to switch it on, all you got to do is this, and then it begins to happen. Anyway, that's a practical practical aspect of it as well that I wanted to throw into the mix. But yeah.
I want to hear more on Torsten, if I'm saying that right, on how he developed his 5 things or whatever.
I think the thing was that Torsten was talking about his actual feature in those areas, which is, we came to the decision that he's an empath, what we call an empath, and which I think he agreed to. But it was in towards the fact of his early esotericism of life, which is something that's still part of what he is, you know. So it isn't really that there's a whole system in play with Torsten, unless of course he explains it himself that way, you know. But I don't think so. Are we all right for time here? Because I know people have appointments at 6. Did you want to round off or something, Pierce?
Soon. If we want to run for another 10 minutes, first of all, let me say, if anyone does need to go, you know, send us a message.
Let me say that next week there could get up to 200 people here.
Yeah, big event next week.
We don't know exactly how many it's going to be, but there's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
And
we won't break the internet.
You've got some other activities going on during the week, haven't you, on the tarot? Isn't that right?
Yep.
Facebook and something, yeah. Are they invited to that? Am I invited to that?
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's 1:30 in the morning for you, which are more than
Well, it won't be the first time I've stayed up all night for nothing.
Give me
Sorry,
something to do at 1:30. Give me something to do at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I think about 30 in the morning. All right, yeah, thanks. That's recovering from nights with you. Yeah, and then next Saturday, yes, it is at 6 o'clock our time. That's
your time.
I mean, and your time is what?
11 in Colorado, and you know, I think we have people in various different places. So
yeah. Yeah, come in. It's going to be good fun, really. If you don't enjoy it, something's wrong. Yes, you know, I've never in my life, I don't know about Pierce ever, but my life has in this been one long happy journey. Yes.
Orman, you need to do your own Zoom group.
My own Zoom. I do an awful lot now on WebEx.
I don't know what that is.
I've got conferences that have been going on there with one particular gathering of people. 11 years that one's been going on every week for 11 years, and more than just every week. It's more than once a week sometimes. And then there's other ones as well, and so on and so forth. And so it goes on all the time. It really does. We're all engaged in it, aren't we? Yes, exactly. So it should be quite a big event next week. So it can be a tiring week for old guys like me, you know that, don't you? Unhealthy, fit stallions like yourself, you'll live through it without anything at all, no problems, right, Zaya? You're like that too, yes? And
I'm only doing 5 meetings this week anyway.
Is that all it is now? You're
slacking.
Glutton for punishment, aren't you? Eh? I've just done a pod on that one, so I'll send that to you later. Sorry, you know, right, okay, whatever.
Well, good. Let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Sake, just one thing. See, we have at the moment just filmed everything we've done. Donkeys and donkeys and donkeys. You know, we've got over 1,600 videos. Some of them 12 hours long. In fact, the majority are. Yeah. And so if you started now, didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't go to the toilet, didn't go out, nothing, just continuously watched them, somewhere around the middle of September, you'd just coming near to the end of it.
If you didn't evaporate sometime before then.
Yeah, that's if you didn't die. And
spontaneously
combust. Really awful happened to you, like a spider gobbled you up or something, you know. Yeah. So it's not as though what we're saying that is, it's all recorded, so that nobody can change what was said or done. Because, you know, after a while, if it's not, people say, oh no, you said this and you said that, and that kind of thing begins. And we want to avoid that with all we can, because sometimes, you know, like Torsten that you so picked up, there's something about people as well that contribute to what we do because they themselves are like it already. They don't. Torsten doesn't have to go in pursuit of that. That needs development. That needs work on it. Really, in my book, more than anything else, you know. Sorry, Pierce. Just say, Orman, shut up. Go on.
Orman, shut up.
That's how I get talked to here anyway. My name here, by the way, is Oi. You.
Oi.
Oi,
Right.
you. That's
Oi.
Oi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me.
My name here is Hey.
Is that what it is?
Got Hey and Oi.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you call a medium that tells a lot of jokes?
Yeah.
A happy medium.
Okay, it's a good one. How do you make holy water? Boil the hell out of it. Right.
Boil the hell out. Right, good. Okay. Thank you, everyone. If you want to get in touch with me, most of you have my email. It's pierce@eminentway.org. If you want access to some of the videos and I don't share the link with you, or if you miss it or something like that, please just email me. Again, the website, eminentway.org. So a lot of resources, okay? Keep you going. All right, thank you, everyone.